I'll start with a quick review for this book, Beyond Order 12 More Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. I'll give this book 3 out of 5. I really like the author, but I think he's better in talking and lecturing. He has great lectures online on YouTube and his podcast, but I feel like his writing is not as good as his talking, basically. He's going way off topic, in my opinion, in many of the methodological ideas, go in length about it. The book was too long. Some of the chapters and some of the sentences are a little not complex, but kind of unnecessarily wordy and doesn't make a lot of sense. But there's also he always has some great ideas. That's why it's a 3 out of 5. I would not necessarily recommend reading this book. I would recommend listening to his lectures. They're much more interesting and engaging than his writing. Same thing applies to his previous book, which is kind of the sequential part of his previous book, 12 Words for Life. I think that was the first. Same thing. His writing is not as good. He's going off topic sometimes, and he's going on tangents. So yeah, I would not necessarily recommend, but there is always some good ideas. So if you're not gonna read, if you're not gonna listen to the lectures, might at least listen to this. But I would recommend listening to the lecture first. Let's see the notes. If the big rat doesn't let the small rat win sometimes, the small rat would stop playing. So what's what happens when there is no cooperation, when uh, the small rat would stop playing. And the same thing applies to general life. Stories could be used as general rules that can be applied to future situations. That's why we use stories. It's a general rule and we can apply it. It's not the same one-to-one, but we can apply it to future situations. Rules must be broken sometimes if to keep things normal. We cannot stay always by the rules. They have to be broken sometimes, and he has some examples. Humans, unlike animals, change and adapt at will. That's what makes human more, I want to say special, I don't know if that's the right word, but different is that they can adapt at will and not due to force. Stories are generalized rules we come up with. So it's a similar idea to what I spoke before. It's a generalized rule, or if the way I think about it is kind of an algorithm that you can apply. A letter may seem to be simple, but it holds much greater meaning to us. E.g., IRS letter. The IRS letter, when we get it, it seems like a very simple thing. It's just a piece of paper with some ink on it, but it holds much greater meaning. Side note, the methodological parts of the book are a little too long. That's what I say. He's going in long tangents about some methodological parts, Harry Potter and other stuff. He's doing the same thing in the lectures parts, but for whatever reason here, it's not as good. I don't know why. I didn't exactly pinpointed the reason of why it's not that good, but it's way too long, and the book is too long for the same reason. So I think it should have been a little shortened a little bit. Don't let small yet painful things in life go untreated. We all have some of those little things that bothers us. They're very small. They might be minor, but there could be yet painful, and we should not go not treating them. There could be many things that contribute to a certain feeling. Oftentimes, it's the less obvious ones. Many times, it's not the obvious things that contribute to a certain feeling. The fog is when we prefer to keep things vague, so vulnerability and failure kept intact. That's what he calls the fog. We purposely keep things unclear and vague, so we're not going to get hurt. In discussion, it's better to avoid accusations and cite feelings instead. So instead of saying blaming someone for what they did, it's better to cite feeling it makes me feel X. Difficult is necessary. That's how the game starts. It says like we want it, we want things to be difficult. This is how it's interesting. Aim yourself for higher good, so your goal is one and not divided. So when we don't have a goal, we have many different goals, and then our attention is divided, and we cannot achieve as much. There is no evidence to support different learning styles improve outcomes, and there is great emphasis these days about learning outcomes, but he says that there is no evidence to support how they are superior. Science is incapable of taking into account complex phenomena, such as I think that he cites God and mythological ideas, because it's hard to prove, and they cannot. When you cannot prove the small parts, you cannot explain what it means. Those who cannot commit cannot achieve as much. Similar idea to what we spoke before. So, if you cannot commit, or if you don't have a goal, you cannot achieve as much. Good discipline is having the ability to control one's emotion properly. This is one good thing to have in life, is to know how to control one's emotions. We now miss most of our surroundings while immerse ourselves into other things, such as phones, etc., and we don't notice what's really going on around us. He says that he barely remembers what's around his house because he's always distracted. Sticking our heads out entails danger, but also holds great reward. So when you stick your head out, you're more likely to get hunted or get killed. I'm talking about animals, obviously, but the same applies. But also, when you stick your head out, you're more likely to find great rewards. We like stories so much since it encompasses learning opportunities. Sorry about that. So that's why we like stories that much, because stories hold learning outcomes. And it goes back to the idea that stories are kind of an algorithm, kind of a generalized rules. So that's why we like them, because it has like little bits of data that is beneficial and can help us in the future. Trust requires bravery. Even as we are being vulnerable, trusting could yield great results. So in order to trust someone, we have to be brave. It requires bravery because we are being vulnerable, essentially. But the reward is great. It is recommended to talk about maintenance things with partners around 90 minutes per week. That's what he says, like about 90 minutes a week about maintenance stuff. Like what do we do, how we do, when we do, and all that small parts that people try to avoid, but it's important. Asking why me is a form of victimhood. When you ask why it happens only to me, it's basically being victimizing ourselves. And the last one, positivity is the best approach. Life, he says that we should be positive. That's for the notes. Again, it's an interesting book. I wouldn't necessarily recommend. Depends if you're interested in his writings. Again, I would recommend listening to lectures instead. So that'll be a 3 out of 5. And thank you.